I think as soon as you see the car that we're filming today, you're going to know exactly what it is. It is, of course, the brand new Mini Cooper, and it's a car which is launching primarily as an electric version, though there will be petrol alternatives coming along soon. But what this new car aims to do is incorporate the same level of character that its predecessors had, but with some more clever in-car tech and more range than the previous Mini Electric could deliver. So what we've done is we've come out to Spain, which is thankfully dry and sunny today, and we're going to see what this latest car is like to drive, to find out whether or not this new Mini Cooper can live up to the expectation that comes from so many previous generations which were really successful. So let's go and see what this new Mini has to offer.
This latest Mini looks, well, like a Mini. Certainly from the front end, we've got the same cutesy and retro-infused style that we had on the previous generation car, but it's around the back where things take a dramatic change. The rear tail lights look strikingly different to those fitted on the older Mini, and it's where it makes a bigger impression than it did before. It's worth pointing out that this latest Mini is in fact a tiny bit shorter than the one that came before it, though it's slightly taller, which is how it's able to offer a decent amount of interior space.
Mini has always managed to implement some of its classic touches into its interiors while ensuring that everything still feels up to date and current. And I'd say that's pretty much the same for this new generation of Mini Cooper. We've got the toggle buttons which down here which feel reminiscent of starting with an old-fashioned key, and we do have some nice physical controls and some good areas down here for storage of loose items. The main steering wheel is quite thick and it's got this fabricy bit down here which Mini is quite proud of, and this feels, well, more BMW than Mini in truth. Elsewhere we've got some little touches like these leather strap sections, which I'm not entirely sure of because it doesn't really do anything, but I do like the full length vents. And then of course we've got this large OLED screen in the middle which is very, very thin but packed with features, so you can go through everything Spotify, all of your ventilation systems. It's quite information heavy, so you do sometimes find yourself a bit lost in all of the fixtures and fittings inside there. But the good thing is it is responsive, and of course you do have some optional controls down here for just putting on the blowers to the front screen and to the rear screen. It's also worth mentioning that as a 3-door, this Mini Cooper is slightly tight on space, but all cars get ISOFIX points up front as standard, which means that if you aren't going to want to put a child seat in the back, and let's be honest, it's going to be a bit of a faff, then you will be able to mount a child seat up front here. Now obviously you aren't buying a Mini for its space, but the rear seat legroom in this new Mini Cooper actually isn't too bad for me anyway. I'm just under 6 foot, the seating position is in where I would be sitting, and I've got a decent amount of room for my feet, which is most important, and there's a cutout here for my knees, so I'd say it's not too bad if you're average height. If you're a bit taller, it's going to start feeling a little bit snug, but the headroom is pretty decent, and I like the fact that they've kept the windows which feel a bit like the original new generation Mini, the first BMW Mini. They had similar kind of cutout windows, and I think that's really cool. Other than that, there's not an awful lot to speak about. There are no cup holders. There are some side slots for storing, I don't know, pens maybe, if you want to keep them down there. But I do like the fact that you've got these cutouts here for the speakers, so you can, there's a little bit of an accent there to brighten up what is otherwise a relatively dull backseat area. There are ISOFIX points back here, but because of the small aperture that you're going to go through between the door and the seat, I think getting a child seat in here is going to be a bit of a struggle. You definitely want to use that one up front. And this car also has a panoramic sunroof which helps to lighten up the interior, which can otherwise feel a little bit dark. It does well to not feel too claustrophobic back here, despite it being very small. So similar to the rear seats, you can't come to the Mini Cooper and expect it to have loads of boot space, but there is, well, there's 210 litres of room back here, and as you can see, with one reasonably sized cabin bag, that's pretty much taking it all up. So there's not a huge amount of space to explore. It's slightly more than you would have got in the older electric Mini, but it's quite a way off something like a Cupra Born, which will offer well over 100 litres more space. Quite a lot of it is taken up by a sound generator underneath, although thankfully you can take this out and there is a small area to put your charging cables. That's the most important thing, I think, with an EV. Although, as I always say, having them under the boot does mean that when you've got stuff in there, you have to take it all out in order to get the charging cables. It's not a huge amount of room, but it is useful for the overall size of car that it is. Minis have always been exciting to drive, regardless of the type that you've gone for, and in fact the previous generation Mini Electric was one of my favourites. I really enjoyed driving the previous generation Mini Electric. It just didn't have much range. In fact, during winter time you could see that crawl back down to, well, around 100 miles. So The big difference for this new version is that the largest battery version of the Mini Cooper, now we're calling the Mini Cooper, will deliver 249 miles from a single charge, and that's actually a proper usable amount of battery life. And that means that this car isn't just restricted to town driving, though let's be honest, it's probably where it will be at its best. It's a somewhat shorter car than its predecessor, but it is in fact taller. That's how they've managed to get a little bit of space out of the inside of this vehicle. And I will say that despite the shrinkage in terms of length, it, if you excuse the pun, it feels quite wide on the road actually. It feels like a physically, well, quite a big car. There will also be a smaller battery version of the Mini available, and that brings 190 miles of range, but I think realistically most people are going to go for this 249 mile version. The interesting thing is that Mini has done away, it's not going for a dual motor setup like we've seen on other performance electric cars. This has just got a single motor, but in fact on this version you're able to get 0 to 60 mile an hour in around 6.5 seconds, which is good, and also about the same as you'd get from a petrol powered Mini Cooper S. Alright, that'd be slightly quicker, but not an awful lot in it. The thing that I really like about this Mini is that they've managed to keep the body in check. This is still a heavy car and it's weighing, I believe, over 2 tons, so for a Mini it's not very mini in terms of its weight, but because you've got that instant delivery of the torque, and because of how they've managed to sort out the steering, it still feels like an exciting car to drive. The Mini has always been quite a firm drive, and certainly I know the first generation of the new Minis these days feels very brittle. And this car is still the same. It's still reasonably firm, and I will admit that this road that we're driving on today is beautifully smooth, unlike the UK. But on some surfaces that we've managed to find that have been a little bit broken up, this still feels relatively firm. And actually, when you're doing motorway speeds, you get this odd kind of porpoising, a bit like an F1, where the car is trying to deal with its own weight, and because it's so stiffly sprung, it's just bobbing up and down. It's not too bad, it's just an odd characteristic to have. At the moment, I've got the car set into its quiet mode, so there's no noise accompanying it, but I can toggle through a variety of different experiences that Mini call them, and you can change through whichever you want to a variety of different settings, and then you actually get these rather odd noises to accompany it. It's kind of fun, I guess, if you want to have that on. If you don't like it, just switch it off. I don't see too much of a problem. I actually found it a little bit distracting sometimes, particularly this very, very loud one, which sounds like, I don't know, like the Millennium Falcon's trying to come up right behind you. But again, it's a little bit of fun, and you can rotate through different ones and it makes it sound different. But like I said, if you want to, just switch it off. The only thing I feel like I could need is some form of way of controlling the regenerative braking. I've got 2 settings. I can either have it in standard drive or in B, which ups the amount of regen I'm getting. But what I would like is if I could have some paddles on the back that would control the various levels of regen, and that would just add an extra level of interaction between me and the car. In the same way that when you have an automatic gearbox and you want to change gear, you change with the paddles, and you feel like when you come up to a corner you can drop a few paddles, or a few gears I should say. If I had that for the regen, that means I could come up to a bend, flick down, and I'd get a little bit more braking or regen performance, and I think that would just elevate the driving experience slightly. I do like the way this Mini drives. It feels like it's in keeping with some of the spirit of the cars that have come before it. And it's remarkable that it does all this while still managing to maintain its weight, which of course is more than the previous one. Is it more fun than a petrol or even a diesel alternative? Well, I think that's a hard one to describe, but I do think that having the immediacy of the electric motor certainly adds an extra level of excitement to the whole driving experience. I do just think that Mini had an opportunity to make this car much smaller, along the lines of something like a Honda E or a true city car with some clever battery tech. Mini has the Aceman, which is its mid-size crossover, and it has the Countryman, which is now even bigger and more spacious than ever before. So I think that what Mini could have done in the spirit of the original, which was so groundbreaking in its packaging, it could have just made this car really small and good for cities and urban environments. And of course that does bring in some problems with fitting enough range or a large enough battery in order to give a good amount of range. But that's my only criticism of this car, is that I feel like Mini could have gone further with the space saving and made this a genuinely small car. It's not often you hear nowadays of new cars or newer versions of cars getting smaller, but I think that could have been a great opportunity for this latest Mini. There's always been a component that's been core to the Mini experience, and that has been fun. And thankfully, I feel that has been retained in this latest generation car. Sure, I feel like there could have been an opportunity to make this car just a little bit smaller, given that they've got the Aceman and the Countryman above it as more practical options. But having said that, this is still a really nice car to live with day to day. And most importantly, it's got more range than before, it's got more tech inside, and it feels a little bit better pulled together than it was previously. The looks, well, they might dissuade some people from going for this car, but I still think that it's got some of that character that has made the Mini so successful over the many generations. But most importantly, it's that range. I think having a boost there makes this actually a viable option as an EV, whereas the previous one just felt like a bit of an afterthought. This is a fully fledged Mini now, and that's the most important thing. Thank you for watching this new car review on the Mini Cooper. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comment section what you think of this very yellow new electric car. Would you pick it? Would you choose the petrol alternative, or do you think you'd go for something else entirely? And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel, and if you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification directly to your inbox each time we upload a new video.